Sophia's first memory was one of cold isolation. The stone floor of St. Mary's Orphanage biting into her small body as she lay huddled in the corner of the dormitory. Hello. Welcome. Enjoy, subscribe, and activate notifications. She was only 4 when she arrived, clutching a tattered blanket that was the last remnant of the life she had known before the accident. Though she had no clear memories of her parents, the absence of their presence was a void she could feel in her bones. The orphanage, with its towering gray walls and echoing corridors, became the entirety of her world. From the beginning, Sophia was different from the other children. Where they cried, she remained silent. Where they played, she watched. Her small, pale face often wore a look of distant contemplation that seemed too old for her tender years. The nuns at the orphanage, strict and unsentimental, viewed her quiet demeanor with a mixture of indifference and suspicion. There were too many children under their care to worry about one strange little girl who didn't seem to fit in. The days at St. Mary's followed a monotonous routine. Morning prayers were followed by chores, then breakfast, which consisted of thin porridge that did little to stave off hunger. The older children attended school while the younger ones, including Sophia, remained behind. Left to their own devices, they would form cliques, playing roughly and sometimes cruelly. Sophia, always the outsider, was often the target of their mockery. They called her names, pulled her hair, and excluded her from their games. But Sophia never cried. Instead, she would retreat to the small library, a dusty, forgotten room that smelled of old paper and disuse. The library became Sophia's sanctuary. She spent hours there, losing herself in the stories of faraway lands, brave heroes, and magical creatures. The books were her friends, her escape from the harsh reality of the orphanage. Even though many of the books were too advanced for her age, Sophia was determined to understand them. She taught herself to read by matching the words with the pictures, and as she grew older, she devoured every book she could find, from children's tales to history, science, and poetry. But as the years passed, Sophia's isolation deepened. The other children grew wary of her, sensing that there was something about her that set her apart. Her refusal to engage in their games, her habit of retreating to the library, and the air of quiet melancholy that surrounded her made her an easy target. The older girls, in particular, took pleasure in tormenting her. They would snatch away her books, hide her belongings, and sometimes even lock her in the dark, damp basement as a cruel joke. Sophia endured it all with a stoic silence that only seemed to infuriate them more. At night, when the others were asleep, she would lie awake, staring up at the ceiling, her mind filled with a mix of anger and sadness. She couldn't understand why she was so different, why no one wanted her. The idea of being adopted, of being taken away to a loving home, became a distant fantasy that she no longer allowed herself to indulge in. She was convinced that she was unlovable, that there was something fundamentally wrong with her that made her undeserving of love and affection. Sister Maria, the headmistress of the orphanage, was a stern woman in her 50s with a no-nonsense attitude and a strict adherence to the rules. She ran the orphanage with an iron fist, believing that discipline was the only way to keep the children in line. Yet, despite her harsh exterior, there was a glimmer of kindness in her that surfaced on rare occasions. It was she who first noticed Sophia's intelligence. One afternoon, when Sophia was 10, Sister Maria found her in the library, surrounded by books that were far beyond the reading level of a typical child her age. "What are you reading?" Sister Maria asked, her tone more curious than accusatory. Sophia looked up, startled. "A book about the stars," she replied quietly, holding up an astronomy book that she had been poring over for hours. Sister Maria took the book from her, flipping through the pages. "Do you understand what you're reading?" she asked, more sharply this time. Sophia nodded. "I think so, sister." Sister Maria studied her for a moment before handing the book back. "Keep reading," she said, her voice softer now, "and don't let the others distract you." From that day on, Sister Maria began to give Sophia extra responsibilities. She was allowed to assist in the office, helping to sort papers and organize files. It was a welcome distraction from the bullying and isolation that had become a daily part of Sophia's life. She also began helping with the younger children's lessons, guiding them through their ABCs and simple math problems. Sophia took to these tasks with a quiet determination, finding solace in the work and the sense of purpose it gave her. But no matter how hard she worked, the sadness in her heart never truly went away. Every night, she would lie in bed, listening to the other children's breathing, some of them snoring softly, others murmuring in their sleep. She wondered if they, too, felt the same emptiness that she did. But in the end, she knew that she was different. She was the girl who had no family, who had never been wanted, who had never been loved. The years passed, and with them, any hope Sophia had of being adopted faded into nothingness. By the time she was a teenager, she had resigned herself to the fact that she would grow up in the orphanage, and when she turned 18, she would be sent out into the world with nothing but the clothes on her back and the few belongings she had managed to collect over the years. The only thing that kept her going was her love for books. They were her lifeline, the thread that kept her tethered to the world. In them, she found stories of people who overcame great odds, who found love and friendship, who discovered their true purpose in life. Sophia clung to these stories, even though she doubted that such a fate would ever be hers. Still, they gave her something to hold on to, something to believe in, even if it was only in the pages of a book. The day Sophia turned 18 was like any other in the orphanage. Cold, gray, and unremarkable. There was no celebration, no acknowledgement of her birthday. The other children barely noticed as she packed her few belongings into a small, worn suitcase. She had no friends to say goodbye to, no one to miss her once she was gone. The only person who seemed to care at all was Sister Maria, who called her into the office that morning. Sophia sat quietly in front of the large, imposing desk, her hands clasped in her lap as she waited for Sister Maria to speak. The headmistress regarded her with a mixture of sternness and something that might have been sympathy. "You've been here a long time, Sophia," Sister Maria began, her voice measured. "But now it's time for you to leave. You're an adult now, and you need to make your own way in the world." Sophia nodded, her expression blank. She had known this day was coming, had prepared herself for it as best she could. But now that it was here, she felt a gnawing anxiety in the pit of her stomach. "We've arranged for you to stay in a small apartment," Sister Maria continued. "It's not much, but it's a start. You'll be working at a bakery in the city. The owner is a kind man, and he's agreed to give you a chance." "Thank you, sister," Sophia said quietly, not trusting herself to say more. Sister Maria studied her for a moment, then nodded. "You've always been a hard worker, Sophia. I'm sure you'll do well. But remember, life outside these walls is not easy. You'll face challenges and you'll have to be strong. Don't let the past hold you back." Sophia nodded again, though she wasn't sure she believed it. The past was all she had ever known. How could she leave it behind? Later that day, Sophia left the orphanage for the last time. The gates clanged shut behind her, and for a moment, she stood there, feeling a wave of panic wash over her. She was alone in the world now, with no one to turn to, no one to rely on. The orphanage, for all its coldness, had been her home, the only place she had ever belonged. Taking a deep breath, Sophia forced herself to start walking. The streets of Lisbon were bustling with people, but she felt invisible, a ghost drifting through the crowds. The apartment Sister Maria had mentioned was a small, one-room flat in a rundown building in a working-class neighborhood. It was sparsely furnished. A bed, a table, and a chair were all it contained. But it was clean, and for that, Sophia was grateful. The first few days in her new life were overwhelming. The city was vast and noisy, a far cry from the quiet, insular world of the orphanage. Everything was strange and unfamiliar, the people, the sounds, the smells. But Sophia threw herself into her new job at the bakery, determined to make the best of her situation. The bakery was a small, family-owned establishment that had been in business for generations. The owner, Mr. Almeida, was a kind, patient man in his 60s with a passion for bread-making. His hands were calloused from years of kneading dough, and his face was lined with deep wrinkles, but his eyes twinkled with a warmth that immediately put Sophia at ease. "Sophia, isn't it?" Mr. Almeida said with a smile when she arrived for her first day of work. "Welcome to the bakery. We're a small operation here, but we take pride in what we do. I'll show you the ropes, and soon enough, you'll be a master baker yourself." Sophia smiled nervously, nodding as she followed him into the kitchen. The warm, yeasty smell of bread filled the air, and for the first time in days, Sophia felt a small spark of hope. The work was hard, kneading dough, mixing ingredients, baking loaves in the large industrial ovens, but it was satisfying. There was a rhythm to it, a sense of purpose that calmed Sophia's nerves. As the days turned into weeks, Sophia began to settle into her new routine. She woke early each morning, arriving at the bakery before dawn to help prepare the day's bread. By the time the sun rose, the bakery was already filled with the scent of freshly baked loaves, and customers began to trickle in, eager to buy their daily bread. Sophia quickly learned the art of bread making, and though she rarely spoke, she earned the respect of Mr. Almeida and the other workers with her diligence and quiet determination. In the evenings, after her shift was over, she would return to her small apartment, exhausted but content. She would make a simple dinner, often just a piece of bread with cheese or fruit, and then curl up with a book, losing herself in the stories that had been her refuge for so long. But despite the small comforts of her new life, the loneliness that had plagued her in the orphanage followed her to the city. Sophia had never been good at making friends, and now, in this new, unfamiliar world, she found it even harder. The bakery workers were friendly enough, but they were all older, with families and lives of their own. They didn't understand the sadness that clung to Sophia like a second skin, and she was too shy to open up to them. One of the few bright spots in Sophia's life was her daily walk to and from the bakery. She would take different routes each day, exploring the city's narrow streets and hidden alleyways. Lisbon was a city of contrasts. Its grand, historic buildings standing side by side with crumbling tenements, its vibrant markets bustling with life while quiet corners offered moments of solitude. As she wandered, Sophia felt a growing sense of connection to the city, as if she were slowly becoming a part of its fabric. It was on one of these walks that Sophia first noticed the small, independent bookstore tucked away on a side street. The shop was called Livros and CIA, and its window display was filled with an eclectic mix of old and new books. Intrigued, Sophia pushed open the door, and a bell tinkled softly as she stepped inside. The interior of the shop was cozy and inviting, with tall wooden shelves crammed with books of every genre. A faint smell of old paper and ink hung in the air, and soft jazz music played in the background. The shop was empty except for a middle-aged woman behind the counter, who looked up and smiled as Sophia entered. "Good afternoon," the woman said warmly. "Can I help you find something?" Sophia shook her head, her eyes roaming over the shelves. "Just looking, thank you." "Take your time," the woman replied. "We've got a little bit of everything here. Feel free to browse as long as you like." Sophia nodded and began to explore the shelves, her fingers brushing over the spines of the books. There were so many to choose from: classics, contemporary novels, poetry, non-fiction. She felt a thrill of excitement, like a child in a candy store. Books had always been her escape, her way of making sense of the world, and here, surrounded by them, she felt a sense of peace she hadn't felt in a long time. After an hour of browsing, Sophia finally selected a book of short stories by a Portuguese author she had never heard of. She took it to the counter, where the woman smiled as she rang up the purchase. "Good choice," she said, glancing at the book. "This author has a way of capturing the human experience in such a profound and moving way. I think you'll enjoy it." "Thank you," Sophia replied, her voice barely above a whisper. As she left the shop, the book tucked under her arm, Sophia felt a flicker of something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. Perhaps this new life wouldn't be so bad after all. Perhaps, in this city full of strangers, she could find a place where she belonged. Winter had settled over Lisbon, bringing with it biting winds and a chill that seeped into Sophia's bones as she walked to and from the bakery each day. The bakery itself was warm and inviting, a refuge from the cold. But outside, the city seemed harsher, less forgiving. The days were short, the nights long and dark, and the loneliness that had plagued Sophia for so long began to weigh on her more heavily. One particularly cold evening, after finishing her shift, Sophia found herself wandering the city streets with no destination in mind. The Christmas lights that adorned the streets and shop windows only served to heighten her sense of isolation. Everywhere she looked, she saw happy families and couples, their laughter and warmth a stark contrast to the emptiness she felt inside. She eventually made her way to a small park, its trees bare and the ground covered in a thin layer of frost. She found a bench and sat down, pulling her coat tightly around herself in a futile attempt to keep warm. The park was nearly deserted, the only sounds the rustling of the wind through the branches and the distant hum of traffic. Sophia stared at the ground, lost in her thoughts. She wondered what her life would have been like. Would she be happier? Would she know how to connect with people, how to make friends? Or was she simply destined to be alone, always on the outside looking in? As she sat there, her thoughts spiraling into darker and darker places, she heard a small voice beside her. "Excuse me, miss. Are you okay?" Sophia looked up, startled. Standing in front of her was a little girl, no more than 7 or 8 years old, with bright red mittens and a matching scarf. Her cheeks were rosy from the cold, and her wide brown eyes were filled with concern. "I'm fine," Sophia replied automatically, though the tightness in her chest told a different story. The girl didn't seem convinced. She climbed up onto the bench next to Sophia and rummaged in her pocket before pulling out a small piece of candy. "Here," she said, offering it to Sophia. "My mom always says candy makes everything better." Sophia stared at the candy for a moment, then took it with a small smile. "Thank you." The girl beamed at her, swinging her legs back and forth as they dangled off the bench. For a few minutes, they sat in companionable silence, the girl's presence a surprising comfort to Sophia. "Where's your mother?" Sophia asked finally, glancing around. The girl pointed to a woman standing a little distance away, watching them with a gentle smile. The woman gave Sophia a nod and began to walk over. "This is Sophia," the girl said proudly as her mother approached. "She looked sad, so I gave her some candy." The woman smiled warmly at Sophia. "I hope my daughter hasn't been bothering you." "Not at all," Sophia replied, touched by the child's kindness. "She's very sweet." "She is," the woman agreed, ruffling the girl's hair affectionately. "And very good at noticing when someone needs a little cheering up." The woman looked at Sophia more closely, her smile softening. "It's getting late, and it's awfully cold out here. Would you like to join us for dinner? It's just the two of us, but we'd love some company." Sophia blinked in surprise. The offer was so unexpected, so out of the blue, that she wasn't sure how to respond. "Oh, I don't want to impose." "It's no imposition," the woman insisted. "We'd love to have you." There was something so genuine, so kind in the woman's eyes that Sophia found herself nodding before she even realized what she was doing. "Thank you. That would be nice." As they walked back to the woman's apartment, the little girl chattering away happily, Sophia felt a warmth spreading through her that had nothing to do with the scarf the woman had lent her. It was the warmth of human connection, something she had been starved for all her life but had never quite known how to find. The apartment was small but cozy, filled with the sense of home-cooked food and the sounds of laughter. The woman introduced herself as Maria, and her daughter as Sophia, and the three of them sat down to a simple but delicious meal of soup, bread, and cheese. The conversation flowed easily, with Sophia providing most of the entertainment as she told stories about her day at school, her friends, and the various mischiefs she got into. Sophia found herself laughing along with Maria, the sound unfamiliar but welcome. She couldn't remember the last time she had laughed like this, or even if she ever had. For a few hours, the heavy weight in her chest lifted, and she felt lighter, freer, more herself than she had in years. After dinner, Maria and Sophia walked Sophia back to her apartment, chatting amiably as if they had known her for years. When they reached her door, Maria turned to Sophia with a warm smile. "It was lovely having you over, Sophia. You're welcome to join us any time." Sophia, who had been holding Sophia's hand the whole way back, squeezed it tightly. You should come to our house for Christmas. My mom makes the best cookies. Sophia smiled, her heart swelling with a warmth she hadn't felt in a long time. I'd like that. Thank you, Sophia. Maria gave Sophia a gentle hug before they said their goodbyes. And as Sophia watched them walk away, she felt a deep sense of gratitude. It was such a small thing, an act of kindness from a stranger and her daughter, but it had touched Sophia in a way she hadn't thought possible. As she lay in bed that night, Sophia thought about Maria and Sophia, about how easily they had welcomed her into their lives, how they had treated her like a friend, like family. The walls she had built up around her heart began to crack, and for the first time, she allowed herself to hope that maybe, just maybe, there was a place for her in this world after all. The weeks that followed that cold winter's evening marked a turning point in Sophia's life. The friendship she had begun to build with Maria and Sophia grew, bringing warmth and light into the corners of her heart that had long been shadowed by loneliness. For the first time in years, Sophia began to believe that perhaps she wasn't destined to be alone forever, that perhaps there was more to life than the solitary existence she had known. Sophia spent more and more time with Maria and Sophia, joining them for dinners, outings, and sometimes just quiet evenings at their apartment. The small gestures of kindness, Maria saving a seat for her at the movies, Sophia slipping her a cookie when Maria wasn't looking, slowly began to chip away at the walls Sophia had built around herself. With each shared laugh, each moment of genuine connection, Sophia felt her heart begin to heal. Maria, who had faced her own share of challenges as a single mother, became a mentor and confidant for Sophia. She had a natural warmth and wisdom that drew people to her, and Sophia found herself opening up to Maria in a way she had never done with anyone else. They would sit together over cups of tea, talking for hours about everything and nothing, about the struggles of life, the things they had lost, and the dreams they still held on to. You have so much potential, Sophia, Maria would often say, her voice filled with quiet conviction. Don't let the past define you. You're stronger than you know, and you can create the life you want. At first, Sophia wasn't sure if she believed Maria. The idea that she could shape her own future, that she had the power to change her life, was foreign to her. All her life, she had been at the mercy of others, first the nuns at the orphanage, and now the circumstances of her new life in the city. But slowly, Maria's words began to take root in Sophia's mind, and she started to see herself differently. Sophia had always found solace in books, but now, she began to see them not just as an escape, but as a source of inspiration. She started reading more deliberately, seeking out stories of people who had overcome adversity, who had found hope and strength in the face of impossible odds. And as she read, she began to wonder if she, too, could find that kind of strength within herself. One day, as she was browsing through a bookstore, Sophia came across a blank journal. It was simple, with a soft leather cover and crisp, empty pages just waiting to be filled. Without really thinking about it, Sophia bought the journal and took it home, where it sat on her desk for days, untouched. Finally, one evening, after a particularly difficult day at the bakery, Sophia opened the journal and began to write. At first, the words came slowly, awkwardly, as if they were strangers she was trying to get to know. But as she wrote, something inside her began to unlock, and the words started to flow. She wrote about her life at the orphanage, about the loneliness that had been her constant companion, about the small moments of joy she had found in books and in the few friendships she had made. She wrote about her fears and her hopes, about the darkness that still lingered in her heart, and the light that she was beginning to glimpse on the horizon. Writing became a daily ritual for Sophia, a way to process her thoughts and emotions, to make sense of the world around her. The more she wrote, the more she began to see patterns in her life, to understand the ways in which her past had shaped her. But instead of feeling trapped by that past, she began to feel a sense of freedom, as if by putting her thoughts on paper, she was taking control of her own narrative. Sophia's newfound love of writing didn't go unnoticed by Maria, who was quick to encourage her. "You have a gift, Sophia," Maria said one evening as they sat together in her living room. "Your words have a way of touching the heart. You should share them with others." Sophia blushed, embarrassed by the compliment. "I don't know," I'm not sure if my writing is good enough. Maria smiled warmly. It's more than good enough. And even if it's not perfect, that's okay. What matters is that you're putting yourself out there, that you're telling your story. You never know who might need to hear it. The idea of sharing her writing with others was both thrilling and terrifying to Sophia. She had always been so private, so guarded with her thoughts and feelings. But Maria's words stayed with her, and over time, Sophia began to think that maybe she did have something worth sharing, something that could resonate with others. With Maria's encouragement, Sophia began to take her writing more seriously. She joined a creative writing group at a local community center, a small but supportive group of aspiring writers who met once a week to share their work and offer feedback. At first, Sophia was nervous, unsure if she would fit in, but the group welcomed her with open arms. They were a diverse bunch, young and old, beginners and experienced writers, but they all shared a passion for storytelling. The group was led by Anna, a published author with a deep love for nurturing new talent. Anna saw something special in Sophia's writing from the very beginning. You have a raw, emotional honesty in your work, Anna told her after one of their sessions. It's rare to find someone who can write with such vulnerability and truth. Keep going, you're on the right path. Sophia felt a surge of pride and gratitude at Anna's words. For the first time, she began to believe that maybe she did have something to offer the world, that her voice mattered. The writing group became a safe space for Sophia, a place where she could experiment, take risks, and grow as a writer. The feedback she received was invaluable, helping her to refine her craft and develop her own unique voice. As Sophia's confidence grew, so did her sense of self-worth. She began to see herself not as a victim of her past, but as someone with the power to shape her own future. The loneliness that had once defined her began to fade, replaced by a sense of purpose and connection. She had found her passion, her calling, and with it, a community of like-minded individuals who supported and believed in her. Sophia's journey of healing was far from over, but for the first time, she felt that she was on the right path. She was no longer the scared, lonely girl she had once been. She was a writer, a storyteller, a woman with dreams and ambitions. And with each word she wrote, she felt herself moving closer to the life she had always longed for. Spring had arrived in Lisbon, bringing with it a sense of renewal and hope. The city was in bloom, its streets lined with colorful flowers, and the fresh scent of the ocean carried on the breeze. Sophia, who had always loved the change of seasons, felt a new energy within her, a sense of possibility that had been missing for so long. One afternoon, after finishing her shift at the bakery, Sophia decided to take a different route home. She wandered through the narrow, winding streets of the city, enjoying the warmth of the sun on her face and the sounds of the bustling marketplace in the distance. It was a day like any other, but there was something in the air, a feeling that something important was about to happen. As she walked, Sophia passed by a small, independent bookstore tucked away on a quiet side street. The sign above the door read Livros and CIA, and the window display was filled with an eclectic mix of books, from bestsellers to obscure literary gems. Sophia had passed by the shop many times before, but this time, something made her stop and take a closer look. There, in the window, was a sign advertising a book signing event that afternoon. The author's name caught Sophia's eye: Luca, a well-known writer whose books she had read and admired for years. The thought of meeting him in person, of hearing him talk about his work, filled Sophia with excitement. Without a second thought, she pushed open the door and stepped inside. The bookstore was small but cozy, with tall wooden shelves crammed with books of every genre. The air was filled with the comforting scent of old paper and the soft sound of pages turning. A few people were already gathered near the back of the store, where a small table had been set up for the signing. Sophia joined the line, feeling a mix of nervousness and anticipation. She clutched a copy of Luca's latest book, her fingers tracing the embossed letters of the title as she waited for her turn. When she finally reached the front of the line, Luca looked up and smiled, his warm brown eyes crinkling at the corners. "Hi there," he said, his voice friendly and approachable. "What's your name?" "Sophia," she replied, handing him the book. Her voice sounded small and uncertain, but Luca's smile put her at ease. Luca took the book and signed it with a flourish, then handed it back to her. "There you go, Sophia. I hope you enjoy it." Sophia smiled, feeling a surge of happiness at the simple interaction. "Thank you," she said. "I've read all your books. They've meant a lot to me." Luca's expression softened, and he leaned forward slightly, as if to emphasize his sincerity. "That means a lot to me, too. It's always humbling to hear that my words have touched someone's life." Sophia hesitated, feeling a sudden urge to say something more, to share a piece of herself with this man whose words had been such a source of comfort and inspiration to her. "I'm a writer too," she blurted out, her cheeks flushing with embarrassment. "Well, I'm trying to be." Luca's eyes lit up with genuine interest. "That's wonderful. What do you write?" "Short stories, mostly," Sophia said, her nerves beginning to ease. "I'm just starting out, but I really love it." Luca nodded, his smile encouraging. "Every writer starts somewhere. The important thing is to keep writing, no matter what. You never know where it might lead." Sophia felt a warmth spread through her chest at Luca's words. She had always admired him from afar, but to hear him speak to her as a fellow writer, as someone with the potential to create something meaningful, was more than she had ever expected. "Thank you," Sophia said, her voice filled with gratitude. "That means a lot to me." Luca smiled again, a smile that was both kind and knowing, as if he understood the significance of what he had just said. "Keep writing, Sophia. You've got something important to say." As Sophia left the bookstore, the signed book tucked safely under her arm, she felt a sense of exhilaration she hadn't felt in years. The encounter with Luca, brief as it was, had left her inspired and motivated, more determined than ever to pursue her dreams. Over the next few days, Sophia wrote with a new sense of purpose, her words flowing more freely than ever before. She poured her heart and soul into her stories, finding joy in the act of creation, in the discovery of new characters and worlds. The more she wrote, the more she felt that she was on the right path, that she was finally beginning to find her voice. Sophia's encounter with Luca was a turning point in her journey as a writer, a moment that gave her the confidence to believe in herself and her abilities. It was a reminder that her words mattered, that she had something important to share with the world. And with that belief came a sense of freedom, a release from the doubts and fears that had held her back for so long. For the first time, Sophia began to see herself not just as a writer, but as someone with a story worth telling, someone whose voice could make a difference. And as she continued to write, to explore the depths of her imagination and creativity, she felt herself growing stronger, more confident, more alive. The months that followed were a time of growth and discovery for Sophia. With each story she wrote, with each word she put on paper, she felt herself becoming more in tune with her own voice, more connected to the part of herself that had been waiting so long to be heard. Writing became not just a passion, but a lifeline, a way for Sophia to express the thoughts and emotions that had been bottled up inside her for years. The creative writing group at the community center became a second home for Sophia, a place where she felt understood and supported. Each week, she would share her latest work with the group, listening eagerly to their feedback and suggestions. The group was small but diverse, with members of all ages and backgrounds, each bringing their own unique perspective to the table. Anna, the group's leader, was a constant source of encouragement and guidance. She had a way of seeing the potential in each writer, of helping them to bring out the best in their work. "You have a gift, Sophia," Anna would often say after one of their sessions. "Your writing is so honest, so real. Keep going, you're doing great." Sophia treasured Anna's words, taking them to heart as she continued to write and refine her stories. She began to see herself not just as an aspiring writer, but as someone with a message to share, someone who could touch the hearts of others with her words. The group was planning to host a public reading at the community center, a chance for the members to share their work with a wider audience. Anna encouraged Sophia to participate, telling her that it was time for her voice to be heard. At first, the idea of reading her work in front of an audience terrified Sophia. She had always been so private, so careful about sharing her thoughts and feelings. The thought of standing up in front of strangers, of bearing her soul through her writing, was almost too much to bear. But Anna's words stayed with her, and slowly, Sophia began to see the event not as something to fear, but as an opportunity. A chance to step out of the shadows and into the light, to share her story with others and perhaps even touch their lives in some small way. The night of the reading arrived, and Sophia was a bundle of nerves. She had spent hours practicing her piece, reading it over and over until the words felt like second nature. But nothing could prepare her for the moment when she stood up in front of the audience, the spotlight shining down on her, her hands trembling as she held the paper. For a moment, Sophia felt like she couldn't breathe, like the words had been stolen from her throat. But then she remembered Anna's encouragement, the support of the group, and the belief they had in her. She took a deep breath, closed her eyes for a moment, and then began to read. As the words left her lips, Sophia felt a strange sense of detachment, as if she were watching herself from a distance. But as she continued, something shifted inside her. The fear began to melt away, replaced by a sense of purpose, a sense of connection to the audience before her. The room was silent as Sophia read, her voice filling the space with the raw, emotional honesty of her story. She spoke of her childhood at the orphanage, of the loneliness and isolation she had felt, of the moments of light she had found in books and in the few friendships she had made. She spoke of her journey to the city, of the challenges she had faced, and of the hope she had found in the kindness of strangers. By the time she finished, the room was so quiet that Sophia could hear her own heartbeat, pounding in her chest. She looked up, her eyes scanning the faces of the audience, and what she saw took her breath away. There was a moment of stunned silence, and then the room erupted in applause. The sound was overwhelming, a wave of emotion that washed over Sophia and left her trembling. She saw people wiping away tears, others smiling at her with warmth and admiration. For a moment, Sophia was too overwhelmed to move, too shocked to comprehend what had just happened. But then she felt a hand on her shoulder, and she turned to see Anna standing beside her, her eyes shining with pride. "You were amazing, Sophia," Anna said, her voice filled with emotion. "You touched everyone in this room tonight. You should be so proud of yourself." Sophia felt tears welling up in her eyes, but they were tears of joy, of relief, of gratitude. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "Thank you so much." That night, as Sophia left the community center, her heart was lighter than it had been in years. She had faced her fears, had stood up in front of a room full of strangers and shared her story, and in doing so, she had found her voice. The experience was transformative for Sophia. It gave her the confidence to believe in herself, to trust in her own abilities, and to see herself as someone with something important to say. She began to submit her stories to literary magazines and online publications, and though the rejections came, so did the acceptances. The first time one of her stories was published, Sophia could hardly believe it. Seeing her name in print, her words out in the world for others to read, was a dream come true. It was a validation of everything she had worked for, a sign that she was on the right path. Sophia's life began to change in ways she had never imagined. The loneliness that had once defined her existence was replaced by a sense of purpose and connection. She had found her passion, her calling, and with it, a community of like-minded individuals who supported and believed in her. For the first time, Sophia felt truly alive. She was no longer the lost, lonely girl she had once been. She was a writer, a storyteller, a woman with dreams and ambitions. And as she continued to write, to explore the depths of her imagination and creativity, she felt herself growing stronger, more confident, more at peace with herself and her place in the world. Sophia's journey had been long and difficult, filled with moments of doubt, fear, and loneliness. But as she looked back on the path she had taken, she could see how each step had led her to where she was now, stronger, wiser, and more resilient than she had ever imagined she could be. The connections she had made with Maria, Sophia, Anna, and the members of her writing group had been a lifeline for Sophia, showing her that she was not alone, that there were people who cared about her, who believed in her. These relationships had helped her to heal, to find the strength within herself to pursue her dreams, and to create the life she had always longed for. But more than that, Sophia had learned something even more valuable. She had learned to love herself. For so long, she had seen herself as unworthy, as someone who didn't deserve happiness or love. But through her writing, through the connections she had made, she had come to see that she was enough, just as she was. She had discovered that happiness wasn't something that came from external circumstances. It was something she could create for herself, through the choices she made, through the people she surrounded herself with, through the stories she told. As Sophia looked toward the future, she felt a sense of excitement, of anticipation. She knew there would be challenges ahead, that life would not always be easy. But she also knew that she had the strength to face whatever came her way, that she had the resilience to overcome any obstacle. She had found her voice, her purpose, her place in the world, and she was ready to embrace the future with open arms, knowing that no matter what happened, she would be okay, because she had discovered the most important truth of all, that life, no matter how difficult or painful it could be, was beautiful, and she was ready to live it to the fullest. Sophia's journey was far from over, but she knew that she was on the right path. She was no longer defined by her past, by the loneliness and pain she had endured. She was defined by the choices she made, by the love and kindness she gave and received, by the stories she told. And as she continued to write, to explore the depths of her imagination and creativity, she felt a deep sense of peace, of contentment, of joy, because she knew that she was exactly where she was meant to be. And for the first time in her life, Sophia was truly happy.